I got all I want, and I got all I need, and I got everything. I got you and me. All I want, I got all I need.
Marriage is the best. Hey, welcome back to Marriage is the Best. Last week we talked a little bit about date nights and having fun on a date with your spouse. And it definitely was an encouragement to me and a good reminder to me to do a date night. So Beck and I sat and played some cards and asked some open-ended questions. Well, I think we actually were too tired for open-ended questions, so we ended up with closed questions. It was a good time. I've definitely found that as I have explored marriage topics and discussed marital principles, read and learned and grown in both in practice but also in personal, this podcast has definitely encouraged me to continue to be a better husband and to be a better, definitely encouraged me to be a better husband. Today I'm hoping to explore a bit of marriage counseling and some of the things that I find to be true when you're attempting to help some people work through their differences and engage in a healthier and healthier system of marriage. It's an interesting role to sit in the chair across from a couple of people who are most often suffering greatly and to enter into their story. So much comes out in that initial session when people just kind of begin and start to explore where they're at and how they're dissatisfied with where they are, because by the nature of being in the office, you're usually pretty dissatisfied with where you found yourself. You often get the ideas of those kind of common ideas of feeling like roommates. You get the idea of growing apart. Most of the buzzwords come out in that first session where people are talking about communication, conflict management, those kinds of things. And, there's a good reason that those buzzwords are a part of the marital conversation. Most marriages struggle in the areas of communication. Most marriages have unresolvable conflict. Well, as you know, because you've listened to the 1000 Conflicts episode, all marriages have unresolvable conflict. And so, because in the marital design, there is some inefficiencies, there's some gridlock built into the system, all marriages, find there's some similar notes to the struggles that marriages have. And so I get to sit and hear about the very distinct flavor of the couple that is presenting in front of me, right? Everybody's very different. Everybody presents very different. It's a very different experience walking through each of the stories because everybody's story is so unique. There are so many variables that make up a person. And so when you're doing individual counseling, obviously you're kind of highlighting and engaging all of the individuals' variables. When you're doing marriage counseling, those variables are invariably doubled. So you have double these variables. And I think that's one of the things that makes marriage counseling so difficult, is that when you're entering into their world and engaging them in their marriage, there are so many variables that are impacting the marriage at that time. So some people come in and it's the financial kind of conversation where they're not on the same page, or somebody's been unfaithful or kind of acting out or just kind of refuses to be on the same page. That definitely happens. Sometimes it's, parenting related. There's a struggle surrounding a current season of parenting. That happens a lot. Sometimes it's work related, although most people don't necessarily identify work as the issue. At least in my small sample size, I don't see a lot of people coming in and saying work is wrong or work is causing some of the issue. Although I think work plays a larger role in a lot of people's marital struggles, because work takes so much of the time and energy and effort out of the marriage. And so even though people aren't necessarily identifying it as one of the core issues, it remains one of the primary wedge drivers or time sucks that make it so difficult to prioritize the different systems that make marriage work. The daily connection point, the weekly date night, the night away, those sorts of things. Often work is eating away some of that time. And then, it's oftentimes also creating the fatigue that the couple is experiencing at the end of the day, which makes it less likely for them to connect. So you've got all these variables, and everybody is so unique. Everybody's family of origin is so unique. Everybody has different, maybe mental health related experiences, right? Somebody maybe is coming in is struggling with anxiety, and their marriage is also struggling. So we're not treating the anxiety necessarily, but that's also a very strong element of the conversation that we're having, because anxiety touches their individual system, which means it touches the marital system. Ooh, family stuff. Family stuff comes up all the time. Oh, yeah. I'm not going to say almost everyone, but it feels like almost everybody comes in with some sort of family-related struggle, family-related issue. So yeah, the family stuff actually seems to carry a lot of weight when you're talking to couples. Obviously, the more dysfunctional the family, it feels as though the more dysfunction kind of the individual has either had to face and overcome, or maybe it's just the dysfunction continues on and if there's a grief around it, or sometimes there's a boundary related struggle where the individual is suffering. They're attempting to take on too much of their family, and then it's seeping into and negatively impacting the individual, how they're currently functioning in the marriage. Yeah. So chaos outside the marriage, creating chaos inside the marriage. That's always an interesting one, when the chaos doesn't exactly exist inside the marriage, where instead it's coming from these outside sources, and then those outside sources are just putting a strain or a pressure on the marriage. I actually kind of prefer that system a little bit, just because when it's outside the marriage, it's a little bit easier to create that hedge of protection, those walls around the marriage in order to protect it from the outside. That's actually sometimes easier than it is to address the chaos inside the marriage, because the chaos inside the marriage is often viewed as chaos created by your partner, when in fact, it's always a balance. There's always a middle ground. Now, you could be listening to this and be yo, Peter, my marriage is not a middle ground. My marriage is ruined because of my spouse. And that's just not what we find. It's not really the reality of marriage. It's not that the design of marriage requires both participants to identify their responsibility and take accountability for wherever they're at. So it really doesn't work. That's it kind of gets into that blame, the defensive blame and bitterness, the blaming, bitter kind of narratives or stories that people write is pointing that finger. So when people come in and they think that, marriage isn't a balance of the two, and they start pointing the finger. That's obviously, that's actually can be a very difficult thing to work through. It's not that obvious, but that blaming kind of story it makes marriage counseling very, very difficult. Marriage counseling is kind of like driving down the highway, and you're in the middle lane, and then you've got these two individuals driving, one to your left and one to your right. So you're driving up behind these individuals in the middle lane, and each of them are kind of identifying their respective needs and hopes and desires, and then each of them are throwing crap out of their window into the middle lane. And so my aim ends up being dodge all of the crap thrown into the center lane and bring them closer to each other into that center lane without causing an accident. And mind you, you're traveling at like 90 miles an hour down the highway. It's a little bit like what marriage counseling is like. It's high speed, high stress, high emotion. It can be, it's not always that, but it definitely can be all of those things. And you're dealing with a lot of the stuff in the people's cars, right, that they want to throw at their partner. And obviously it's not hitting the other car. You're not able to chuck something. I guess Ghostbusters could prove me wrong, but you're probably not able to chuck something when you're driving 90 miles an hour down the road out that window all the way into, across one lane into the next. So it lands in the middle lane. And then again, high speed, high emotion, high intensity. You've got to navigate around that and navigate them around that so that the marriage can move forward and become closer and more connected. So yeah, marriage counseling is really difficult. It's a very tenuous, beast, and you have to be really careful. Not in the sense of like not speaking clearly and directly, because we definitely do a lot of that. But the worry or the fear or one of the major pitfalls along the road is to steer your car that is meant for that middle lane, right? Meant as a go-between, to kind of like pivot or kind of fade, steer your way into the one or the other lane. When that does happen, you kind of undermine your ability to serve the marriage when you're drifting. There you go. That's the right word. When you drift from that center lane to like side with one partner over the other, when you side with, either one, all of a sudden you create an imbalance in the therapeutic relationship. Now, so what that means is like if you're consistently on a side, either side, it doesn't matter. And I've made mistakes on both ends. So this isn't like, I'm not saying that I do this perfectly, but it's just something I've noticed. When you make the mistake of drifting into one lane or the other, and your client inevitably and very quickly, very inevitably picks up on that drift that they're seeing. They are bloodhounds for the drift. They know exactly when you have tipped too far into that other lane. And some people are a little bit more sensitive to others. Some people give you a little bit wider of a lane to work with in the middle. And some people's lanes are too tight and some people's lanes are non-existent. There is no room for a third party to come in and connect and to work on things. So you have to kind of realize that at the onset. How much room do you have here? And my one of my good friends and mentors, and I think the world of him, one thing that he has talked about doing in his practice is actually preempting the process of calling out either party And so that what that might sound like, it might sound like something like, hey, in this process, you're going to find that I am going to need to challenge either one of you on your thinking, on your feeling, on your conclusions or your assumptions. And so one thing that we need to be kind of be okay with, or one thing that we need to kind of allow in our system, in our relationship, is this idea of challenge. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually practice challenging you so that you can kind of get a feel for what it might, how you might internalize that challenge. And we'll just kind of notice what happens. And then we can move on, and I'll let you know if I have to present a challenge for you in the future. It's kind of a brilliant strategy by which you can diffuse some of the defensiveness, diffuse some of the harshness or the shock of like, my therapist isn't agreeing with me. And there's a trope here of like, I brought my husband in to fix him so that the therapist could fix him. And he's obviously the problem. Everybody sees it. My friends see it. I was going to say my husband sees it. That would be the wrong thing to say. My family sees it. My mom, oh my goodness. My mom has told me for years that he's in the wrong. That's not good, but sometimes that happens. And so when you come down and you sit in the office and I say, I think that this marriage, I think that your system, I think that a lot of the crap actually exists in this middle lane. And I think that both of you are responsible for this middle lane. No one else can drive here. No one else can drive here, right? Think it's crazy because nobody else gets access to your marriage. And yet people will come in and give a marriage counselor access to that middle lane to like help them work through it. Help them to clean up the mess, help them to understand what's going on, help them to regulate their speed, or, use their windshield wipers. I don't know, wherever the analogy takes you, I guess. But it's a privilege, right? Like there's a crazy blessing privilege. It's surreal sometimes to get to sit with couples along their journey as they're driving, as they're going, and to just, come alongside them in their journey, in the current season of their lives. So the challenging idea, I really love the way that my mentor approaches that, and kind of preemptively giving that notice and helping people to understand that I'm not here for you, and I'm not here for you. And I'm pointing as I'm doing that, pointing to the right, to the left. I'm not here for you, person sitting on my right. I'm not here for you, person sitting on my left. I'm literally here for this stuff in between. I am here so that can be healthy. Now, if I were to be individually serving either one of you, the answers, the relevant, the truth, the perspective, the principles change. I'll give you an example of that. So if in individual counseling, you're all in for one person, right? Like your job, your aim is to care about the person sitting in front of you to the point of helping them to care with them about their lives so that they may grow and build a healthier system. So the goal, or one of the aims, is like, I'm gonna sit here. I'm gonna learn to care about your system, about where you've been, about where you are, about where you're going, and I want to, in my caring and in my connecting with this other person, I want what is best for you, individual. And it's fairly, again, there's simpler variables in the individual than in the couple oftentimes. And so serving that individual and gaining insight into their perspective, and gaining insight into how their relationships run, and how their, what their mental health status is and how that's impacting their functioning and how that's impacting their work, etc. That's one process, and there's an all-in nature oftentimes to a person-centered approach, and I find myself using a very person-centered approach in my counseling of like all in of acceptance of you, all in of non-judgmental, all in of, trying to connect. Now, none of these things I do perfectly, but that's kind of some of the flavor of it, which is extremely different. You wouldn't think of it like maybe just cognitively if you were just thinking about it, but it's extremely different going from this person that I'm sitting with is all in for me and wants what's best for me and wants me to be as healthy as I possibly can. Now, I'm going to change. I'm shifting, right? So now instead of sitting with an individual counselor, I'm going to sit with a couples counselor. And now all of a sudden, the person that I'm supposed to trust with my well-being, who is all for me, whose purpose is to sit with me, to connect with me, to care, and to authentically help me to work through my life so that I can be healthier, is now challenging me. Now, I do a lot of challenging in my individual work, but the challenge comes from a different place. It's more of like hey, I'm a third party, and I wonder if you've thought about it this way, or let's reframe that, or why don't we look at this principle and see how that might apply in this situation? Those are all like soft, gentle challenges. But the marriage counseling challenges look very different. Marriage counseling challenges are mostly geared toward your perspective of this other person. That perspective has been practiced and forged by many, many, many experiences and across a large amount of time. They say on average, people come into marriage counseling like 6 years too late. Now, I'm sure you could hear a lot of different numbers, but so I don't want you to take that as like actually like that's the actual statistic. I don't know what the actual statistic is, but I think what it just shows or what that represents is that people are often coming into marriage counseling after being set in a certain system for a very, very long time. 6 years of existence in a system ingrains that system so far, so deep into the roots, into the chasms, into those, brainy connections and neurological connections. The system is, it's very set oftentimes when it comes into marriage counseling. And so it throws people sometimes, right? So again, we're still talking about challenges, I guess, but it throws people sometimes because the same environment, sometimes even the same person who's doing my individual counseling and who is all for me is now doing my marriage counseling and is challenging me on things that have been evident to me for so very long. And it is dissonant. It is very difficult to have someone else come to you and to say, hey, I think that you need to be thinking about this person in a different way. Now, I may say those words, but I don't usually use those words. I usually use more therapeutic and professional language, but the idea is there. That's kind of the principle, and it's an extremely challenging principle to face because it holds a lot of emotional weight, and it's very deep, and it's very difficult for people. So yeah, marriage counseling can be very difficult. It can be very difficult to receive. It can be very difficult because the systems are there. They have been there for a very long time. It can be difficult because you're receiving a different kind of service. Marriage counseling and individual counseling are just different beasts. It's at least in my experience and in my practice, it's very, very, very different. And I guess that I have heard that echoed throughout, my career and with a lot of people that I've run into. And so maybe it's everybody. Maybe I'm not alone. And then on top of all that, you've got the different values and experiences and variables that people are bringing in, and how dynamic and different and these people are. And they're bringing in, everybody brings in stuff, you know. It's remarkable that 70% of marital problems tend toward being unresolvable. If that surprises you, that's okay, because it surprises me too. The idea is that, you know, we have the same kinds of conflict over and over again in our marriages. You know, these unresolvable conflicts, in my view of it, like if you can think of yourself as a shattered vase, okay, you're like half of one, and there's these jagged edges in your center, and that's just like what being a person is like. Everybody's broken. Everybody's like, not that everybody's a half of a person, nothing like that. I'm not saying that, but everybody's a shattered vase. That's just who we are. That's how we come into the world. And if you imagine, right, so like you've got yourself, your shattered vase, and then there's this other person, and they're also a shattered vase. And so you come together, okay, and when the parts that can touch, there's holes, right? Because not all of your cracks and broken sharp edges and pieces that are gone and missing are exactly symmetrical with your spouses. There has never been a marriage where those things have fit exactly symmetrically. And so there is no whole marriage. There's always holes in the marriage. There's never been a whole marriage. So in your brokenness, you have found another broken, flawed individual. And you have connected all of the possible connecting points to create something really beautiful. And it is beautiful. Marriage is absolutely beautiful. It is the best. And it's also incredibly difficult, and it is made up of two broken pieces, two broken people. So you have holes, right? You've got these jagged edges that don't touch and will never touch. You've got these parts where it doesn't quite match. It doesn't quite fit up. And that's where I think the idea of these unresolvable struggles exist. Because it's not that you would have 70% of struggles if you married Amy, and you'd only have 60% of unresolvable struggles if you married Sarah or Lauren or Becca. No, that's just not how it's going to go. 70%, whether you married any of the girls, any of them. Now, with Amy, you're going to have a certain set of issues. You know, Amy is fun and athletic and loves to be outdoors, and then, you know, she has struggles in, you know, these different areas. But they're different areas of struggle than Sarah, who is thoughtful and extremely hardworking and mindful and feisty and stubborn, which is very different from Becca, who is comical and hilarious and fun and giving and compassionate. Or you could marry Lauren, who is organized and personable and incredibly hardworking and nuanced. Now, none of these relationships are, in fact, better than any other relationship, simply based on the single fact that within each of these relationships, you're going to find about 70% of struggles in the relationship. So there's no such thing as finding like a perfect relationship. Now, there are other variables, obviously, that predict success in marriage. For example, sharing 70% of your values, your core values, is really important in marriage. If you can share 70% of your core values with this other person, so kind of align in the religious, in the political, in the financial, in the familial, and in the child rearing, if you can align, 70% with all those, get really close as you possibly can to somebody who has very similar ideas and values and wants to express those ideas and values in the same way that you do, that's going to help your chances of having a successful marriage go way, way up. But it's not going to negate the fact that you're going to have 70% of struggles. So in a values neutral world where you have all 70% value matching options at your disposal, in this case, Amy, Sarah, Becca, and Lauren, you're going to find that because you match all those values, you're just going to have a different set of issues, right? Like I've heard Gottman use the idea that like Amy is going to want to go out on Friday night because she likes to go out and hang out and have a good time. But Sarah's going to want to stay in on Friday night and read a good book and snuggle up and watch a show. Whereas Becca is probably going to want to do a kind of a mix of both. And Lauren is going to want to do, neither. I don't know. But you're just going to find, right? Like, and so each of those different types of person you're going to find a different struggle with. So like with Amy, you might fight about, her energy and her fun and her, going out and like, maybe you don't want to. And so that creates the struggle. And then maybe with Sarah, you would be the one who wanted to go out sometimes. And so her lack of desire to go out, maybe that's what creates the struggle or the strain in that one. Whereas with Becca, you might just not align, right? Like when Becca wants to go out, you want to stay in. When you want to go, blah, 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 blah. And that's very possible. So that would create conflict. And then with Lauren, maybe she doesn't want to do either. And so you guys just struggle to come up with, because maybe she's super indecisive and you're super indecisive. And so that causes the struggle. There's always a struggle though. That's the thing with marriage, is that there's always a struggle. There's no marriage out there, and there's no person out there. There's no affair out there. There's nobody online. There's no amount of swipes that you can do. There's nobody that's going to fully match you and is going to provide you with a conflict-free relationship. Period. It's not a thing. And conflict in marriage is a really beautiful thing. It's a difficult thing, but it's really beautiful because it also provides lots of opportunities for people to learn and grow and develop and change in the ways that, honestly, we really do need to be learning and growing and changing and developing. And so marriage provides that opportunity. And we often lose sight of that, the fact that marriage does that for us when we get locked into our lane. When you're stuck driving your lane, you're not even considering the middle lane. You're not even considering the far right lane or the left lane, whichever lane you chose to drive in at the beginning of this analogy. Oh boy. So yeah, people get locked in and they start blaming. They start seeing the differences in the variables and say, you're wrong and you're bad and you do it this way and I want to do it that way. And they get locked into those things. We get selfish pretty easy, seeing things from our side. I mean, maybe I should personalize that statement. I get selfish pretty easy and want to watch my stupid... Anyways, we shouldn't go there. Oh boy. It was Pokemon, guys. That's all it was. It's just Pokemon. Watch my stupid Pokemon video. It's a really good video too. It's wonderful. Good job. Good job, Wolfie. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed these ramblings. Oh, we got a really cool review on the Apple podcasting little dealy bob. So if you've got that, that's pretty handy. You can check that out. But if we go to our reviews, we had a really nice one written. It was actually written on April 30th. So it says, I can't recommend this podcast enough. Peter brings a unique blend of personal experience and professional expertise as a therapist, making each episode both insightful and relatable. Oh, thanks. His thoughtful discussion on marriage and relationships provide invaluable, which is a good, 7, I don't know, it's not 7 letters. That's probably more. Anyways, valuable advice that can really make a difference. Whether you're newlyweds or have been together for years, there's something here for everyone. Peter's ability to break down complex topics into actionable insights is truly impressive. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us, Peter. So the funny thing about this is that it was written by a podcast enthusiast's 123 account. I have no idea who this person is. Truly, I have no idea. And in the way that they wrote it, it's a little bit, like I can maybe like make an educated guess on where it might have come from. But I'm just very grateful. So thank you. Thank you, podcast enthusiasts 123. I appreciate your insight and I appreciate you doing that. Now, if you want your review read out loud on the show, as long as it's not full of expletives, you just write a 5-star review and you can get your review read on the air. It's not on the air. It's on the podcast. Wherever the podcast air goes, that's where this is going to go. So yeah, if you hit the About page on Spotify and throw the 5-star, just click the 5-star. You don't even have to write anything. If you do that and then have time, pop over to Apple Podcasts and throw down a 5-star review, because then more people will get to listen to this fun, rambling session on marriage counseling. So we hope you enjoyed it. We hope you're having a good day. Keep investing in your marriage. Make it a priority. And we'll catch you guys later. Bye.
I got you and me. All I want, I got all I need.
Today, let's feel a little more confident. I don't know if my levels are good. My levels are kind of bothering me. I feel like if I'm talking normally, I'm too loud. Is that right? Am I too loud? Checky check, chicky check, chicky check, chicky check, check. I'm blasting my stuff. Okay, yeah. I mean, that's loud, but at the same time, if I turn this down here, do I want to go down a little bit? Messing with my levels mid-session, record doesn't necessarily feel very good. Alone, believe me, no one is alone. Believe me truly, someone is on your side, someone else is not.